So essentially, they tried to flat out ban abortion in the state of Nebraska. And because of this filibuster, which was ostensibly about trans rights, we were able to block this abortion ban. So this is something for us to think about. These moments of crisis, they precipitate opportunities as well. We may not have been able to block that bill were it not for this filibuster. This filibuster was designed to prevent the passage of anti-trans legislation, which was the crisis that I'm mentioning. Our actions in that crisis had bleed over into the fight over reproductive rights. It had a positive bleed over into that fight, and she was able to block that abortion ban, which was a big deal. If it was not for that, I feel absolutely certain that bill would have passed. So, let's get this started. In case you weren't aware, there has been a knockdown, drag-out fight going on in Nebraska, both in terms of gender-affirming care and just general anti-trans bills that have been going on here in the state of Nebraska. And then I haven't talked about it a whole lot, but there have also been attempts to restrict access to abortion and essentially, effectively, outright ban abortion rights in Nebraska. And for a while, it looked pretty scary. It looked like some of that stuff was going to pass. However, our very own Machaela Cavanaugh of Omaha decided to take a courageous stand and filibuster and bring the session to a grinding halt, at least to the extent that she is able to, along with the support of others, especially Megan Hunt, and they have been extremely effective at preventing the passage of many of these bills. In fact, as we are about to read about, Cavanaugh was able to successfully block the one of the most restrictive abortion bans proposed across the entire country. It was a 6-week abortion ban measured from the time of conception, which would have been effectively just a flat-out ban on abortion in the state. And so we will start there. That is where our story is going to begin today. Things get worse. There is a pending vote coming down the pipeline just a couple of days from now, and that vote will determine whether or not people under the age of 19 are able to receive any sort of gender-affirming care, and will also determine whether or not abortion is effectively banned in the state simultaneously. So things have gotten a lot worse, but there is still hope. We still have options available to us, and there is still a fight going on. So let's get in here. Let's get into our first article. Machaela Cavanaugh promises to hold up legislation unless bill to block gender-affirming health care for youth is dropped. When State Senator Machaela Cavanaugh set out to block every bill brought by the Nebraska legislature this session, it was kind of an accident. She was so incensed by the advancement of LB 547, a bill looking to block gender-affirming health care for young people in Nebraska, that she promised to uphold every single bill the legislature brought, including those she agreed with, unless her colleagues agreed to drop it. If the bill continued to progress, she told her colleagues, she would burn the legislative session to the ground. That was way back on February 23rd. 10 weeks later, Cavanaugh has spent some several hundred hours speaking on the House floor at length, delaying every single bill the Senate tries to pass. And I have said this before, and I will say this again. There are a lot of Democrats, a lot of supposedly progressive politicians who like to claim to be on our side and claim to be champions of our rights. But actions speak louder than words, and the types of actions that speak the loudest are the ones that harm you politically and that you get very little to no gain from. And that's exactly what we're seeing from Cavanaugh. Cavanaugh's colleagues are incredibly upset at her for what she is doing. She gets no benefit from this, and neither has Megan Hunt, who has been her staunchest ally. In fact, if anything, it has sort of incensed them from Democratic leadership, So much so that Megan Hunt has actually left the Democratic Party because she is so fed up with their lack of support and even taking credit for her victories in things that they essentially oppose. Sometimes she has filibustered bills that she would really rather be passing, like one agreeing on state senator salaries, a mere $12,000 a year, which, if she agreed to it, would mean she could get paid. Paid more, I guess is what they mean to say. She has filibustered till her lungs became sore, taken naps on her office floor between filibustering. She's filibustered so much she's barely seen her family. Most politicians, especially statewide legislators, they are looking for cushy jobs. They're not real fighters. They're not tough folk. But Cavanaugh has proven that she is not of that same ilk. I imagine when session is over, I will sleep a lot for several days. I'm so exhausted, and I sure hope that she gets her rest. She added, it wasn't a deeply thought out plan. It was just the tool I have available to me. Nebraska's legislature is technically nonpartisan, though each lawmaker identifies either as a Republican or Democrat, with the exception of Megan Hunt now, and that swing is currently in favor of the Republicans 32-17. Now that 32-17 number is extremely important because in order to invoke cloture and overcome filibuster efforts, they need all 17 votes in order to get that. And that largely has not been happening on some very important bills. Also worth pointing out here is that the state of Nebraska has some really weird rules, and it essentially makes it so that these sorts of filibusters can be shockingly effective. And in the past, Ernie Chambers has used this filibuster tactic to great effect, and Cavanaugh is essentially following in his footsteps, using that framework that he laid out in order to fight for the rights of transgender people and also to fight for women's rights in general with regards to these abortion bans. I'm in the minority party here. The only thing I have is time, she explained. We have a 90-day session and a limited amount of hours in which we can accomplish whatever we want to accomplish. And so I decided I was going to take control of that commodity, and that's what I've been doing ever since, explains Cavanaugh. Originally, Cavanaugh wanted to force her colleagues' hands. Would they rather get on with their jobs, passing the huge number of bills, usually more than 200 in one session, required to keep a healthy state moving forward, or were her colleagues so dead set on passing LB 574 that they would fight every other bill rather than drop it? So far, they have chosen the latter. But Cavanaugh has stuck to her crusade because she feels she has no other choice. Speaking to LB 574, she says, it targets a vulnerable minority population in such a vicious manner as to deny them access to life-saving health care, said Cavanaugh. They are targeting children. I don't view it as an option to do anything other than fight against it. That's my job as an elected official. And she is one of just a handful of senators who is doing that job currently. I just wish my colleagues would come together and acknowledge that this is bad for the state, but they've chosen legislating a hateful bill. And I would say that they have chosen to legislate that hateful bill over and above doing the business of the state that they have been elected to carry out. One of the bills Cavanaugh has contributed to blocking in recent weeks was a 6-week abortion ban in Nebraska, which would have effectively made it impossible to obtain an abortion in Nebraska. Just think about this practically. The bill would have measured 6 weeks from conception. How likely is it that somebody would be able to know that they are pregnant and get an appointment and go and have an abortion within 6 weeks of that? That is not a reasonable thing to expect to happen. So essentially, they tried to flat out ban abortion in the state of Nebraska. And because of this filibuster, which was ostensibly about trans rights, we were able to block this abortion ban. So this is something for us to think about. These moments of crisis, they precipitate opportunities as well. We may not have been able to block that bill were it not for this filibuster. This filibuster was designed to prevent the passage of anti-trans legislation, which was the crisis that I'm mentioning. Our actions in that crisis had bleed over into the fight over reproductive rights. It had a positive bleed over into that fight. and she was able to block that abortion ban, which was a big deal. If it was not for that, I feel absolutely certain that bill would have passed. I'm grateful it failed to move forward. It's a total ban, essentially, she said, in reference to the fact that many people don't realize they are pregnant at 6 weeks, just 2 weeks after their first missed period. Realizing this, the Republican co-sponsor of the 6-week ban also withdrew support from his own bill last week, effectively tanking it. The bill ultimately failed to pass by 1 vote. And it's worth noting, though, that this person has since indicated they support that ban. So we'll see how that goes. Cavanaugh believes there is a marked similarity in the way that Republicans have brought 533 anti-trans bills since the 2023 legislative session started, targeting abortion and trans health care. They talk about the actual health care and how horrible it is. They really villainize it. Right before they block access to life-saving care to people, they say, because children need to be protected. And if you'll remember, in previous discussions, we went over these thousands of leaked emails that showed that TERF organizations, which claim to be feminist organizations, so we know how that really goes, Republican lawmakers, and Christo-fascist legal organizations like Alliance Defending Freedom and the family group, I can't remember the name of them, but essentially these very radical anti-abortion, anti-trans organizations were working with supposedly feminist TERF organizations and Republican lawmakers to craft these bills behind doors. And not only that, but they crafted a very careful strategy that was designed to do maximum damage to the gender non-conforming community by introducing all of these bills at once, a flood of legislation that could not possibly be tracked by any sane individual without just remarkable amounts of time on their hands and just being really tough and able to slog through it all. Just a shotgun approach. That is just so overwhelming that even the mere existence of that strategy taking place has had a damaging effect on the community, has increased, or rather, really harmed the way that people feel, increased depression and anxiety. There are probably people who are not alive today because these people have decided to take these actions. Because so-called feminists have decided to ally themselves with Republicans and Christo-fascists in order to go after trans people. So let's not forget that. This is good news, of course, but let's not forget that members of our community have been lost forever because of what they've done. And just like that, you've eliminated health care for trans people in Nebraska, and you've essentially eliminated trans people's ability to exist in Nebraska. It's not about protecting anybody at all. These arguments certainly sound reminiscent of those used in a huge ongoing national case that will decide the fate of a crucial drug used in more than half of abortions in the U.S. This is also a big deal. Plaintiffs bringing that case argue mifepristone, which is used in roughly 53% of U.S. abortions, is hurting women and girls. As well as being the preferred method of U.S. abortions, that drug is used in miscarriage care and for life-saving abortions. But an argument based on the vulnerability of women could be just the thing that drastically curtails access to the drug. So this is currently pending in the Supreme Court, where essentially they're trying to ban the use of this drug, which is one of 2 drugs that's used in many chemical abortions. The procedure is commonly referred to as the RU486 method, and it has made abortion accessible to a lot of people because it doesn't require any surgery. And there's a lot of places in this country where those surgical centers just aren't there, but they're able to get these medications administered to them by medical professionals, and they're able to obtain an abortion where they wouldn't be able to. So if this goes into effect, if mifepristone is banned, which, as the article points out, is used in around 53% of abortions, it's going to significantly curtail access to abortion and significantly curtail reproductive rights in this country. What happens on LB 574 next is unknown. In April, Republicans in Omaha agreed to compromise on the bill, but since then conversations seem to have broken down. No compromise amendment has been submitted, but Cavanaugh's colleagues still have 17 days left to try and pass LB 574, if they choose to. It's unclear if Republicans will have the votes to pass the bill if it is advanced. And this little bit about if they choose to is no longer relevant. They have chosen to, which we will get to in a moment. Cavanaugh and two of our closest allies in the battle against LB 574, Senator John Friedrichsen and Megan Hunt, will continue to fight it regardless. I think everyone I work with would say that I am a substantial roadblock, and that's true. She is a substantial and courageous roadblock. They all are as frustrated with me as I am frustrated with all of it. It still has one more round of debate, and it could fail or pass. If it fails, I will stop talking. If it passes, I will continue talking, said Cavanaugh. And it's worth noting that this filibuster has also stopped another ban on, or another anti-trans bill. So there was a bill that was being considered. It was a supposed drag ban that would make it illegal for there to be any sort of drag performance in the presence of minors. However, the way that it defined drag performance, it effectively would have made it so that any trans person existing outside of their home, presenting as themselves, presenting in a way other than consistent with their gender assigned at birth, would be committing a crime if there just happened to be minors around. So essentially, trans people just could not exist in public if this bill passed. And because of this filibuster, the right wing in Nebraska had to make a decision on what bills they were going to bring forward, because there are so few bills they're actually going to be able to get to a final vote. Every single bill in Nebraska requires 3 separate rounds of debate and vote. That debate takes time. There is a requirement for a certain amount of time of debate. And these filibuster tactics can draw that time out significantly. The only way to stop those tactics is through a cloture vote. I hope I'm getting that right. Sometimes I get the details of how the legislature works a little mixed up. But yeah, so it's very difficult for them to do this. And even if they do have the votes for cloture, they're still able to eat up time. And the session is limited to 90 days. Tuesday, which is the next day of the session, is going to be the 78th day of the session. So they only have 12 more days to pass whatever bills it is that they want to pass. And they have a backlog of a whole lot of things that they would like to pass. So because of this, they've had to choose their priorities. And they prioritize this bill, LB 574, against the so-called drag bill. So because of that, we've defeated an abortion ban, and we defeated the so-called drag ban, which would have essentially banned trans people from public life. Now all we have left is 574 to fight. Even if it does pass, Cavanaugh believes the bill won't make it past an appeals court of challenge, because last year, the 8th Circuit Court of Appeals blocked an almost identical bill brought in Arkansas, which is correct. So there was a bill quite like this that was passed in Arkansas. Sorry, I'm very thirsty today. I'm a real thirsty bitch today. Arkansas passed a remarkably similar ban on gender-affirming care for minors, and it basically immediately went to the court. The court ruled against them. They appealed. The court said they would not hear the appeal, and so that bill never went into effect. And so when we see these really harsh measures being taken against our community, it's important to remember that A, they may not pass, and B, even if they do pass, the fight still isn't over. It still goes to the courts. And then even after that, let's say the courts do not rule in our favor and the courts uphold these unjust laws, we are still able to elect new folks to pass new laws. We're able to do ballot initiatives. So just these things are dire. And fear and sorrow is absolutely justified. But hope and optimism are also justified, because this is going to be a long game. So far, in a lot of ways, I would say the other side is losing. It can be hard to see it that way. But if you really look at the facts, if you look at the long game, I believe that's what's happening right now. And one of the reasons that we're winning this fight and the other side is losing is because of the actions of just a few incredibly courageous people, such as Cavanaugh, who are willing to take rather drastic action, such as filibustering the entire session to protect our community. If this bill passes, it will be tragic for the trans community in Nebraska. It will be tragic for Nebraskans writ large. And then, it's likely to be overturned in the courts. And so we will have done all this harm and it won't even get the result they wanted, she said. But she is looking forward to the session being over and finally seeing her children and her partner. I just want to do normal things that normal people do. Over the last 10 weeks, I've missed a lot. Ain't that the truth? So that's good news, right? So we're able to talk about... So we're able to talk about some successes that have come out of Cavanaugh and Hunt and the actions of others that have been supporting her. However, that doesn't mean that there aren't some very dangerous things coming down the pipeline, as I alluded to earlier. Because LB 574 is still being considered. As a matter of fact, it has now been scheduled for final debate and vote. That will happen on Tuesday, which as of the time of this recording is just about 2 days away. So in 2 days, there will be a vote on whether or not to ban gender-affirming care for minors and whether or not to ban abortion. There's some more nuances to that, and we're going to get into that as we go down this article, but that is essentially what we're working with here. That is the crux of what is going on. The title of this article from news channel Nebraska Central, Conflict Likely Next Week as Nebraska Lawmakers Consider Gender and Abortion Measures Jointly. The two most controversial measures are headed towards being melded into one. Expect a serious floor fight next week as in the Nebraska legislature when an abortion restriction bill that was considered dead for this session resurfaces as an amendment to a controversial bill to ban gender-affirming care. LB 574, the so-called Let Them Grow Act, is on the Tuesday agenda for final reading, after lawmakers considered a committee priority bill dealing with sales and use tax exemptions. Senator Myron Dorn of Adams says that the gender care bill is undergoing some change as a result of negotiations between some senators. The 574 bill, there is an amendment. What it is nobody until 19 can have any type of surgeries, which is extraordinarily rare. I kind of doubt that any gender-affirming surgeries have been done on anybody under the age of 19 in Nebraska ever. That's only done in the most extreme and most necessary cases. However, I would note that those same surgeries are performed on cis people under the age of 19 all the time, and it's not an issue. It's just an issue when a transgender person needs that surgery in order to save their life. But it also grandfathers in anybody that is now on hormone care. In theory, we'll see in a moment. And a third part of that bill is it does leave it up to the state medical director with DHHS with help. That's a weird way to put it. They're going to have a committee hearing and are then going to develop plans for going forward as someone comes with these needs. So Dorn says that anyone that is now on hormone care is going to be grandfathered in. That's true. That is in the bill. However, the new version of the bill also says that it will be up to the state medical director to determine what kind of gender-affirming care people under the age of 19 are able to get. So even though the bill says that as a so-called compromise, this is actually possibly a whole lot worse because an unelected official, the state medical director, could just say, actually, you know what, I changed my mind. I've decided that nobody under the age of 19, which anybody 19 or under is a minor in Nebraska, nobody 19 or under can receive any sort of gender-affirming care whatsoever. They can come up with arbitrary restrictions if they want to, like in other states where they've said, well, like if you have mental health concerns or if you're autistic that you can't have access to mental health care. They can just do whatever they want to. So while it is true that there is technically a provision in this bill that makes it better, there is another provision in this bill which makes it extremely more dangerous. So this whole compromise thing is a whole lot of bullshit. Added to the bill is an amendment that seeks to implement a ban on abortion after 12 weeks of pregnancy. Like we mentioned earlier, this is measured from the time of conception. So really it bans it after 10 weeks of pregnancy. Only 10 weeks. And so, while certainly with those restrictions, some people who need an abortion would be able to access them, a great many of people would not be able to access them. Earlier, LB 626, that was the abortion ban, failed to advance, which would have enacted the 6-week restriction. It had 32 votes on cloture, but needed 33, and that did not pass. Speaker Art and others said it would not come back this year. Well, that turned out to be a lie. As we look back, it does not come back as its own bill and go through the process again. So it didn't even go through the processes bills that bills are supposed to go through. Just they decided, hey, you know what? If it failed, fuck it. We're going to find our own way around it. Because they are so hell-bent on restricting reproductive rights and the rights of women and other people that have uteruses that they don't care about the process. They don't care about the rule of law. They don't care about the sanctity of the legislature that they talk about so much. That's all total bullshit. All they care about is restricting our rights. And if this doesn't demonstrate it to you, I don't know what will. But what they have done now is they have also amended that in the 574 amendment, and they've changed the 6 weeks to 12 weeks. Adding an amendment to a bill on final reading triggers 2 hours of debate before a vote to send the amendment bill to final reading. If that happens, the overall bill would then have additional discussion. One question is, should the two measures be part of the same bill? Yeah, we'll read this quote and then we'll talk about that. Are they like kind or too far apart? It depends on what part of the story you read. The ones that brought the amendment forward definitely believe they are. They have medical aspects and the same type of subject matter. There are also others on the other aspect of this that if it gets challenged in court, the first challenge will be on the fact that they are not alike and that they can't be amended into each other. Nebraska lawmakers have a 4-day break through Monday. The Nebraska legislature is drawing close to the end of this year's session. Tuesday will be the 78th day of this year's 90-day session. So, in the state of Nebraska, any amendment to a bill has to be considered germane to the subject matter of the bill. What is or is not germane is often left up to whatever the senators feel like is germane. Germane just means that it has to be basically addressing the same subject. In a sense, I can see an argument for saying that this is the same subject, right? Because this is about medical care. This is about denying the rights of people. But in reality, if we look at the way that germaneness has been used in the legislature historically, this is not germane at all. And I think it's pretty obvious that this is just a naked, blatant attempt to try to pass a bill that failed because they are dead set on passing it. It's pretty absurd. The fact that they're going to have this debate means it's going to take more time to get the bill to an actual floor vote, which it just needs one more floor vote to pass. So that's good for us because we had the filibuster going for us. That makes things take even longer and helps us in that regard. But it also helps us because some people who may be supportive of LB 574, there are sticklers for the rules in the Nebraska legislature, and they might not be cool with tacking this on. And whether or not this gets tacked on, it could still get the bill itself could still get a floor vote. So there's a chance that we could defeat the abortion ban, but not the gender-affirming care ban. Or there's a chance that we could defeat both of them altogether. Or there's a chance that just the gender-affirming care ban will pass. Or, of course, they could both pass. So really, this has made things even less clear about what's going to happen. And it just shows that we are still in incredible danger. We could still see an abortion ban in Nebraska. we could still see a ban on gender-affirming care for minors in Nebraska that would lead to the death of many young trans people. So there's a lot of reason for concern. There's also a lot of reasons for hope. It does not take very many votes to defeat these bills and defeat these motions. It takes the same amount of votes to prevent to rule that the amendment is ingermane to the subject of the bill and stop that, as it does to stop the bill itself. And we have been successful in getting that amount of votes in the past, though some of the people involved in those votes that voted on our side have since indicated that they probably won't vote on our side. So it's going to be a fight. We don't know what's going to happen. And then even if these things do pass, there's going to be court challenges that could prevent them from going into place at all, at least pending, court decisions. And it's very possible, and I would argue even likely, that the courts would rule in our favor on this. So we should definitely be concerned, and we should definitely fight like hell to defeat these bills and defeat this amendment. But that said, we shouldn't let it get to our head too much, and remember that even if it does pass, this fight isn't over. I plan to be at the Capitol on Tuesday to express my opposition to both the amendment and to the bill, to express that taking away reproductive choice is just an awful, evil thing to do that must be stopped, and that taking away medical care from trans youth that will most assuredly lead to the death of many of those trans youth is a profoundly evil thing to do, and I'm going to do everything in my power to stop them from doing that. If you're in the state of Nebraska, I hope that I will also see you on Tuesday. I'll be there to express my dissent. I'll probably be recording things too. Whatever I'm able to record that's relevant, I will most likely use to make content on TikTok. So if you want to see some of the debate, if you want to see some of whatever happens on Tuesday, make sure you're following my TikTok, Arcane Aria, the number 2, so Arcane Aria 2 on TikTok, so you can see what's going on there. It's time for concern, It's a scary proposition, especially when you consider that in other states, when people have expressed dissent to these actions, the state has acted violently against them. The case in Florida where the children of parents who had participated in a peaceful, nonviolent protest against a bill ban that would affect the trans community were separated from those parents. They separated the kids from the parents in retaliation for protests. Where riot police in Missouri and Florida and elsewhere have just come into galleries and legislature floors and cleared out those who are expressing opposition. So when these things are happening, it's pretty scary, but it's important to make our voices heard. And if you're not able to be there on Tuesday, I hope that you'll contact your senators and express exactly how you feel about these things and demand that they stand on the right side of history on these issues. But that's really all that I have to say. I wanted to bring attention to this fight because I haven't seen a whole lot of attention being brought to it nationally. There has been some, but I think there needs to be more attention drawn to it. This is every bit as dangerous as the things that are happening in Missouri and Florida and Texas. And this is a very serious fight that is coming to a head. And what happens on Tuesday is going to determine the fate for women of all kind and trans people of all kind. It's going to have a very drastic effect on our communities. And it's extremely important that we show up in whatever way we can, whether that's physically, whether that's writing our senators, whether that's making TikTok videos about it, talking to your friends and family, whatever it is. It's important that we fight right now, because right now is probably our last chance to fight the actual bills being passed. So that's all that I've got for today. Stay strong. Keep up hope. Keep fighting. I love you all. If you support my work, please consider donating either on Patreon or Buy Me a Coffee. I'm Arcane Aria on both of those platforms. If you want to keep up with these things, make sure that you subscribe on YouTube. Follow me on TikTok, like I said, Arcane Aria 2. And also follow me on Twitch. I'm just Arcane Aria on Twitch. All of these discussions that go on YouTube are also live discussions that we have on Twitch. And you can participate in those discussions that way. I love you all. Don't lose hope. I've said that a couple of times, but I'm saying it again. We can do this. We're a very strong community. We can succeed. Have a good day. Have a good night, whatever it is where you're at. Bye.